cool flashlight. I'm pretty sure this is the first video I've ever made where the subject of the video doesn't really need any introductions. But let's go ahead anyway. Star Wars is probably one of the most successful and most popular science fiction franchises of all time, maybe next to stuff like Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. And with most of that success, it normally will branch off into different types of media, books, other TV shows, and in today's case, video games. I'm not sure I brought it up a lot, but I am a big Star Wars fan myself, and let me just tell you one thing. In terms of Star Wars, 2019 has been a pretty good year. Not only did we get a new trailer of a new LEGO Star Wars game being developed that covers all 9 films, but now this year we got the Mandalorian TV show, we got Respawn Entertainment's take on the Star Wars franchise with Jedi Fallen Order, and even that Episode 9 itself is still coming out this year. So I thought, why not make a video about all my experiences with all the Star Wars games that I played over the years. Also, I want to lay down some ground rules. These aren't going to be in-depth reviews because most of these games I haven't finished. Some of them I have, most of them I haven't. So I'm just going to give you a brief summary of my thoughts about the game, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. Anyway, let's sit back and relax and we'll take a little bit of a delve into my history with Star Wars themed video games. Hope you guys enjoy. So seeing as we're starting with a sequel, we might as well talk about the original game. Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces was a first-person shooter that was released on all the you see listed here, developed and published by LucasArts. The game itself had a lot of criticism because it was just another Doom clone back in the day, but so many people actually also praised the game, saying that it was actually a solid shooter in and of itself.
I didn't play it.
And that's where Dark Forces 2 comes in. And right off the bat you can see that the game visually stands up a lot better than the first game. Where the original game looked more or less basically how things looked in the MS-DOS days on something like Duke Nukem 3D and even Doom, Dark Forces 2 utilized a much more proper 3D engine in the use of the Sith engine, whereas the original used the Jedi engine. Because we all know the Sith are much better than Jedis.
Sound.
Although I can't really say that the game hits every single note in terms of its visuals. I mean, character models look like shit, the environments look blocky, and overall I just think that the game's visuals have aged quite a bit. In comparison with the first game, where these type of visuals can be considered artistic, and even games nowadays like Ion Fury using the build engine kind of pays homage to these types of shooters of the old days, with proper 3D environments and only sprite-based enemies. But I'm really not here to critique on a game's graphics. How does it play? Well, where something like the original game is comparable to something like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, this game kind of feels a lot more like Quake. You'll be exploring these large maps just trying to figure out where the exit is and killing a bunch of enemies that stand in your way, all with typical weapons from the Star Wars series and some that are exclusively developed for this game. One of the biggest issues from the first game that a lot of people couldn't understand is the fact that there was almost no lightsabers. And this game sought to fix that, even though I never got to it. Yeah, to be quite honest, one problem that I have with a lot of these games from these days is the fact that the level design is kind of maze-like, and I probably spent like a good hour or so trying to figure out where the hell the exit is. I probably got up to the 3rd stage and I give up. But I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy my time with this game, even though it was pretty much short-lived and I really don't want to play it anymore. Maybe if you guys have better persistence than me, maybe you guys will have more fun, and maybe you guys can tell me how the lightsaber combat is. But from the footage I've seen on the internet, it looks clunky, it looks stiff, and it just doesn't look good overall. Any case, I enjoyed what I played, but in the end I can't give this thing a proper score, so let's move on. The Star Wars prequel trilogy is without a doubt the worst trilogy in any major film franchise that have ever existed. Now I'm just kidding, I actually like them. Well, I can definitely see where the criticisms come from. I mean, the acting in some cases is flat, especially from Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen.
Sound.
I mainly liked all 3 of these movies. Well, except for Attack of the Clone, I really thought that movie was boring as shit. And now why are we talking about this? Well, with these prequel films, a lot of video games were based off of it, and here's one of them. Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace released on all the shit you see here. I've mainly played the PC version, and I probably prefer that one the most over the PlayStation version, seeing as that the game actually has cheat code that allows you to switch characters on the whim, and probably the weirdest cheat code I've seen in any game, no matter what it is, changing your frame rate.
Why is this a fucking cheat?
Yeah, there's actually a cheat code that allows you to change the frame rate. I don't understand why the hell this is a cheat code in the first place. But either way, it does make the experience better than on the PlayStation version when it's locked at 30. Now, the one main reason I might like the Phantom Menace movie a lot is because of this video game itself. Developed by Big Ape Productions and published by LucasArts, Star Wars The Phantom Menace is an action-adventure game that loosely follows the events of the actual movie, with a bunch of scenarios sprinkled here and there just to actually pad out the game time. I mean, not that that actually helps a lot because the actual game itself will only last you around roughly 4 hours. So what is it that you actually do in this game? Well, the typical stuff that you do in an action-adventure game. You'll mainly explore a lot of the areas that was actually featured in the film, with a lot of the extra scenarios I've mentioned before. There's a good variety of platforming, combat, and actually, one of the things that this game was praised for the most, actual dialogue choices and side quests. Now, with me being an RPG player, the concept of side quests and dialogue choices isn't really a groundbreaking concept, but I'm pretty sure Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace was the first ever game I actually played that had them. I mean, it's a real far cry from something like Mass Effect, where your choices in that game actually will affect every single thing that happens in the game, where actually you feel like you've accomplished something by making this choice or something up by making another. So you're expected to see a lot of the typical places that were in the movie. You'll go to the Trade Federation ship, then down to the forest where you meet Jar Jar, then go down to the Gungan city where you actually have to rescue him, and then you'll be involved in the Battle of Theed, and then after that, you'll go down to what is undoubtedly the best place in the entire game, Tatooine. Now, the reason why I say this is where the game starts going with a more non-linear structure, where you were basically always pointed in towards a typical direction. Now here in Tatooine, that's where you'll mainly find a lot of these side quests that actually award you with different things like health pickups and stuff. I mean, it's pretty useless overall, but I mean, hell, it's still cool. And above other things, I'm pretty sure this is also the first game that I've ever played in my whole entire life where you were actually gonna do a lot of fetch quests. Because we all know from the movie, this is the scene where you're supposed to meet Anakin so you can find the parts you need to fix your ship, which eventually leads up to the pod race, where he wins the prize money and then you free him to head off to Coruscant. But before all that, you need to talk to a bunch of the people that live in Tatooine so that you can actually figure out about Anakin. Then you have to go to the slave quarters where he's located. Then you talk to his mom, and then you find him working on his pod racer. Then he takes you through the most impractical frickin' shortcut that you can imagine, which almost ends up killing you. That is if you suck in the game, that is. Just so you can reach Watto's shop where you actually find the parts that you need, but then you have to make the bet for him into the pod race. But before you can get to the section where the pod race takes place, you need to do a bunch of fetch quests where you need to find and trade different items just to get the parts you need to fix Anakin's pod racer. Now, this might sound stupid and tedious, and on paper it might be, but to be quite honest, the people you have to sit and talk to really does make it a lot more interesting. Seeing that the people that often have the parts that you need to trade in for aren't really featured in the movie, so there's actually a lot more character put into this game than there was in the film. Then you head out to Coruscant, where we actually get a baffling character change, which is kind of shocking. I mean, through the entire game, you're basically just in control of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, but in other sections, you can actually play as Captain Panaka. Yeah, I don't know why. And Padme. And the beginning section of Coruscant's probably the last time we're gonna actually find that non-linearity that you had back on Tatooine. Because there's one point where the people are busy attacking you, but this jackass won't open the security or just call the guards or something, then you need to buy tickets so you can fly to your destination. But the problem is he doesn't have any tickets on him. So you have to go out into this hangar where literally there are two people standing on each end. One guy that has the tickets that will sell them to you, and the other guy that you have to sell one of your pair of binoculars to so you can get the money in order to pay for the stuff. I'll admit this is pretty stupid, I mean, considering that both of these guys are standing on opposite sides, which makes this the most pointless f***ing quest that you have to do in the game. But after this, the whole non-linear structure is basically gone for the rest of the game. And then the rest of the story plays out exactly how you imagine. So I've been talking about the whole structure of the game and what you'd be doing in it, but how is the gameplay? Well, as I've mentioned before, you play as 4 different characters: Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, Captain Panaka, and Padme. Basically, each of them just being a skin swap of one another. I mean, if you've played as Obi-Wan, you basically played as Qui-Gon, and if you played as Panaka, you basically played as Padme. Now, obviously, if you play as the Jedi, you're obviously going to have access to a lot more skills, like a double jump, your lightsaber, and force push. That's really it. Well, to be quite honest, I haven't used any other force powers besides force push in the movie, so I guess that's why the decision was made. But still, the limitation of just one force power for a video game, that could have opened up a lot more opportunities for different types of puzzles and ways to get around the environment. But one of the weirdest things, you play as a Jedi, you have a lightsaber. But the funniest thing about this is that you're not just limited to using the lightsaber. Yeah, you can pick up a bunch of different weapons. The fact of the matter is that a Jedi that uses weapons other than a lightsaber is really cool, to be honest, but still doesn't make sense in context to the movie. And on the other side with the other two, yeah, you're just basically limited to the weapons and you don't have a double jump, nor do you have force powers. So I would probably say that playing as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon is the best experience you're gonna get. Now, I've praised this game a lot for how cool it is actually in comparison to the movie, but it still has a bunch of problems. First of all, the f***ing camera. The thing can't decide where it wants to focus. Most of the time it'll be a top-down view which kind of obscures what's ahead of you until it's in view. And sometimes it'll just switch angles for absolutely no reason, and we'll just go back to the top-down view no matter what. So really, this is probably the biggest issue that the game has. Next up, the game itself can get really repetitive. I mean, a lot of the times, with the exception of Tatooine, you're basically doing the same stuff. It's just a complete different environment change. You're gonna be pressing buttons to open doors, you're gonna be killing a bunch of enemies, and you'll be talking to the occasional person that would either give you a fetch quest or just progress the story. And that's basically it. I mean, like I've mentioned, with the exception of Tatooine, this entire game is just basically linear, and it's really not that interesting to go about. Overall, like I said, I did enjoy my time with this game, and I'm really sure that a lot of people should rather give this game a shot than rather watching the movie. So, with that being said, I'd recommend this game. Give it a look. So with the financial success of the Phantom Menace, not only did it just get the game based off of the movie itself, there's also been a bunch of spin-off games that have been released. So we're gonna be taking a look at the next one, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, released on all the Now, a lot of people can consider that one of the best parts of the movie was the pod racing scene. And I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really a big fan of this. This is probably the most unpopular opinion I've had in a while. But this part of the movie was actually popular enough for them to make a racing game based off of it. Actually, there was two. I've only played this one. Why am I reviewing these games? So if I can describe Episode 1 Racer in one way, it's essentially F-Zero, but with pod racing. That's it. So what is it that you're gonna be doing? Well, I don't really need to ask this question. You're basically just gonna be going about racing on the bunch of tracks that they've made on this, mainly completely original tracks exclusively developed for this game. I mean, you have the obvious one, which is the Bunta Eve race that you've seen in the movie, but aside from the different track variety, the only major difference with this game is that you actually have a bunch of pod racers to race with. I mean, you obviously have Anakin, you basically have the bunch of other pods that you've seen in the movie, and that's basically it. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed this game as a kid when I was playing it on the PC, but replaying it nowadays, it's really boring. I don't know why. Actually, I'm lying, I completely know why, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. Basically, this is just an arcade racer where the only standout features that you're actually playing with pod racers. I mean, I'm really not so sure what's so special about that, seeing how this game handles everything, and you'll obviously be doing the normal racing game stuff. This time only with much more high-speed vehicles than normal games. I mean, if you played F-Zero, I'm pretty sure you'll feel right at home with this. You're just gonna be going through all the tracks, maybe 3 laps or more, depending on how many laps there are available or how many you choose, and then that's basically it. Nothing more to it. I mean, one of the things that this game tried to do is they try to actually add an unnecessary amount of depth to it. Like, you can go to Watto's shop and you can buy different components that upgrade your pod racer. I mean, this is the typical stuff. There's like traction, there's top speed, there's acceleration, there's turning, all the basic stuff that a racing game should have. But why for this? I mean, seriously, it doesn't matter what you buy, that the stats don't really feel all that much different. I mean, I've tried it with 2 different pod racers, there wasn't really that much of a difference, despite the stats that each different racer has. And on top of the simulation aspects that this game adds, when you're busy racing, you'll see a status gauge at the bottom left of the screen. Okay, that just shows you the condition that your pod is in. Now, if you completely damage it too much, and if it reaches to warning, the thing's gonna blow up, and you're gonna blow up as well. But there's absolutely no penalty for this. I mean, you respawn immediately, and not even in a penalizing position that makes other racers overtake you. And this is where my main issue of the game comes in. It's too easy. I've played the tournament mode, which is probably the mode you're gonna play the most when you're using this game for a single-player adventure. And there's about 3 tiers. I mean, you have amateur, intermediate, and I didn't even see what the other one was. I gave up so soon. But I didn't even notice this until I almost finished the first part of the tournament. And like I've said, the big issue with this game is that it's too easy. I went into a race, I've completely passed everyone, and they never stood a chance to ever catch up. Even on the odd occasions where I fucked up, my ship blew up, and I had to respawn first, and they did manage to overtake me, that didn't matter because I caught up immediately and I went to first place again. And on top of that, back to the simulation elements I've mentioned before, there's even a section where you can buy pit droids where they have to repair your stuff. I haven't seen any changes. I f***ed up my ship more times than I could count, went back into a race, and the results were still the same. I went into the race, I won, no chance of anyone ever catching up to me. That's how it's been for the whole time. And what eventually made me give up is the fact that that was the amateur course. Then I thought to myself, maybe the next tier might be a little bit more difficult. I'm pretty sure that's where the difficulty comes in. I went into one race in the intermediate section, and the results were still the same. I thought that the people were actually going to be able to catch up more often, but no! Nothing! And then I eventually gave up because I was getting bored senseless. I didn't even attempt to check out the other modes of the game. I didn't even want to see what other racers I could have unlocked. And I'm not even sure I would have gotten anyone to help me with the multiplayer, which is the only point where I can feel that you would have any fun with this. At least from my point of view. If I have to give this game one point where I think that the difficulty screwed me up was the track design. If you don't pay attention to anything, the only thing that's gonna stand in your way from winning is the environment, because if you run into something immediately, you're blowing your ship up, and that's a up. So overall, in my opinion, the game isn't really bad. If you want to actually have a nice F-Zero-like Star Wars racing game, then give this one a go. I mean, if you got some friends that are willing to play it, then go ahead, give it a go. But I was bored shitless. This is probably one of the games that ruined my sense of nostalgia with the Star Wars themed game. Overall, I can recommend this to some people like die-hard fans that enjoyed the pod racing scene so much, but from my point of view, I didn't have as much fun with this game as I thought I was originally gonna have. Maybe the game itself might have improved further, but seriously, if the results are gonna be the same, me going into a race, me buying more pointless upgrades, more pit droids that don't do shit, I don't really see any point in going on. So, let's move over to the next game. So with keeping up with the tradition of releasing spin-off games based off of the worst movie in Star Wars' history, here we go on to the next one. Star Wars Jedi Power Battle is released on all the you see. Now whereas the original Phantom Menace game was more of an action-adventure game, this one does an entire genre shift and is more of a traditional beat-em-up type game. You have a selection of over 5 different Jedi, some of them which were featured in the film but weren't actually shown doing any action, like Plo Koon and Mace Windu, whose lightsaber color they got wrong. Well, he didn't use his lightsaber yet, so no one knew the thing was going to be purple anyway. So you'll be doing what you'll be doing in most beat-em-up games, where you go from one point of the stage to the next, busy clearing waves and waves and waves of different enemies, all just to finish the stage, get a high score, move over to the next one. Also by utilizing some special items that they used in the stage, as well as some special abilities, which takes the form of the Force in this game. And if I can sum up my experience with this game in one short sentence, it was boring as yeah, just like Episode 1 Racer, I found myself getting bored at this game quickly, but not because of the difficulty being too easy. No, in this case, it's kind of the opposite. The game itself is just too hard, and I wouldn't say for the right reasons. I'd say majority of the time, the hit detection was screwed out of its mind, because every single time I try to hit a droid or one of the mini-bosses, normal attacks would sometimes just outright miss, and I can't understand why this is. Where for majority of the time, I had to use my Force moves, but in this case, your Force doesn't actually respawn. No, you need to actually find some power-ups in order to recharge both your health and your Force powers, which doesn't actually make sense. I mean, in context of it being a beat-em-up game, I can kind of understand, but in context with something being the Force, that's something that's constantly around a Jedi and is able to use it whenever they have the strength, what's the point? And yeah, I didn't even really play too much of this. I mean, the game was so stupid and so boring, I didn't manage to make it off of the first stage, which probably won't be fair to criticize it yet, but once again, if my experience is already going to be this tedious and this boring and this repetitive, once again, I feel like the experience can be salvaged if you and a friend try this, but once again, I only went in with this alone, and if a majority of other Star Wars games were able to give me a much better adventure for a solo player like myself, then what's the point? Once again, I can't really give this a proper score. If you guys played it more and you guys actually enjoyed it, then you guys tell me if I'm just being an asshole, but I don't give a fuck. So, yeah, this is gonna be split into 2 parts. I probably should have mentioned that in the beginning of the video. For this part, I mainly just wanted to focus getting the 5th generation of Star Wars games out. I mean, the games that were released from 1995 to 2000. So we can actually focus a bit more on the other generation of Star Wars games in part 2. And what can you guys expect to see from part 2? Well, where I've started, I was starting to play from Jedi Outcast, and then we'll be rounding the entire video up with Jedi Fallen Order. So I really hope that you guys enjoy that. So I'm John from the channel with a freakishly long name. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for part 2, and I will see you guys then.